Here with Matthew Bartlett at the Roost.com. Thank you, sir, for coming on, talking a little Rice football. How are things going on your end?
Absolutely. It's a pleasure. It's June. Kids are getting back on campus. We'll have fall camp sooner or later, and then it'll be football time again, just like that.
What is kind of the level of optimism? I know coming out of spring, it's usually pretty high anywhere. Just compared to maybe the last couple of years, where do you kind of, rank this team's optimism going into the fall and into the summer?
Uh, I think from a team perspective, that's the one thing that this group has been just as optimistic and positive as anybody could ask. So I think they really believe with where they're at. They think kind of within the walls that it was a couple bad injuries and a couple overtime bad bounces that kind of kept them from getting the bowl game they wanted to. I think on the outside, kind of there's some measured optimism. Last year was supposed to be the year, and folks are not yet, but you're getting itchy for things to finally be delivered like they were promised.
How would you grade or even describe kind of the Mike Bloomgren era so far?
Incomplete. Is that fair? I think if you're going to look at it, you're going to evaluate a coaching staff. There's really only two prongs, right? There is progress on the field, wins and losses, and there's recruiting. Are you getting the victories, and are you getting the talent? And from a recruiting perspective, three of the highest graded classes in the 247 recruiting era in Rice program history have been recruited by Mike Bloomgren. He's recruited the highest rated players, multiple to sign that Rice has ever had. And Jake Bailey, Luke McCaffrey, a couple other guys that have come in. So the talent is coming in the door. It's better than what was here before. Check that box. On the field, it's there. So it's both pieces. Eventually, if the wins on the field don't catch up, you run out of time. So I think so far, like we've said again, 2022 is going to be kind of the prove it or lose it season of can you translate half of that into the ultimate goal, which is the wins.
I'd say Seth Luttrell at North Texas, Jake Spavital at Texas State are kind of coaching for their jobs, for lack of a better phrase, going into 2022. Do you think that's the same with Bloomgren, that, he needs to reach a bowl game or be 500, get to a winning record in order to kind of be the head coach of this team as it transitions into the American Conference?
I think the American point is a good, interesting, kind of an inflection point for a lot of programs making, all six of them moving to the AAC. Other than, UAB and UTSA, there's some uncertainties there. I think what Bloomgren has going for him is AD Joe Carlgard tends to be pretty one on the analytical side, as you can expect at Rice. So if there's anybody that's going to say, you went 5-7, not 6-6, here's why. It might be Joe, but at the same time, at some point after so many years, you got to get there. So I think if he doesn't show tangible signs of progress and deliver on those expectations, then yeah, I think he's kind of run his course. Bowl game is the expectation once again, but it's one of those things, I think this administration doesn't want to make the mistake of cutting bait too soon when they see the building blocks that you're supposed to see. So wait and see.
Week one against USC, obviously a tough game. Who do you pick to take the first snap under center offensive wise? Do you think it's going to be Wiley Green or TJ McMahon?
You asking me, or you asking me what I think the coaches are going to do?
I'm asking you.
If you ask me, I'm putting TJ McMahon under center. He's kind of, I kind of labeled him a gunslinger into last year. He's the kind of guy, he threw an interception in that final game against Louisiana Tech that should have been the nail in the coffin, put him down 2 scores, and then led 2 touchdown drives in the fourth quarter and got him the win. So he's not going to be perfect. He's kind of raw. He hasn't played a lot of D1 football. But I think you need a spark. And Wiley Green has been with this program for, I've lost track of how many years. He was in Bloomgren's original signing class at this point, led the win over UAB, which is the largest win this program has had under Bloomgren. So he's got some goods with him, but we've also kind of seen, he can get sped up and maybe the upside isn't there. So yeah, McMahon might not have it. He might not be the answer, but at this point, you talked about coaching for your job. I'd rather go out playing on my cards. And I think McMahon is that we don't know the upside or the downside yet, and it's worth trying.
I'm of the opinion we talk too much about quarterbacks a lot of the times when we're talking about programs, but in Rice's case, it almost feels, and you correct me if I'm wrong here, it really does feel like the quarterback position hinges so much this year. Ari Broussard at running back is going to be really good. I think everybody feels pretty good about that offensive line. I think I could argue that the wide receiver position is better off today than it was this time last year, even with Jake Bailey entering the transfer portal. Is it fair to say that Rice's success in 2022 kind of hinges on whoever emerges at that quarterback spot?
I mean, yeah, you mentioned it's cliche, but it really does. And we talked about this, I think back in the spring when I was chatting with you. If TJ McMahon does take a starting snap at any point this year, he'll be the 12th different quarterback to start for Rice since 2017. You're like, wow, Matthew, that 5 years, 12 quarterbacks. Yes, they've had 3 different starting quarterbacks in a handful of seasons under Bloomgren. And it's not been, this guy's been ineffective, so we'll bench him. There's been a couple of those, but it's been injuries and just, weird sets of circumstances. And they haven't been able to get any sort of offensive consistency whatsoever. I think you kind of saw the inklings of that under Coach Tui, OC brought in last year, but you really just need one guy. They've kind of done that experiment where you have this guy to run in and come in and he'll run kind of the option plays, the running plays, and Wiley will be the drop back guy. But I think you just ride with one guy and see where it gets you, because Rice hasn't had that opportunity yet.
Defensively, it feels like this group could be one of the better units to come through Rice in a long time. What do you consider the strength of that unit, the defensive line or the secondary? I think they both kind of would argue with each other on who's the better group right now.
Yeah, it's a good problem to have, right? I think Akina Ichukwu and DeBraylon Carroll, you put them at edge and nose, that's going to be a havoc-wreaking pair that we haven't really seen because they haven't been on the field together because DeBraylon was out last season, and they got Isaiah Floyd. They got so many pieces there on the defensive line that I think could be difference makers. And then the secondary, Jordan Dunbar really kind of came on last year, kind of guy we thought would be buried on the depth chart. And, he defended Treylon Burks in the Arkansas game. It did went man on man with him at the goal line and won. And, Treylon Burks is playing in the NFL. So Dunbar's going to be great. You got George Nyakwal, who's now missed back-to-back seasons. Trayshawn Chamberlain was out last year. You just had so many pieces that the best iteration of this defense under Mike Bloomgren was probably at the tail end of the 2019 and 2020 seasons. And even the 2020 season, they didn't have most of their safeties back. This has been a battle-tested, worn-out unit the past 2 years. But, knock on wood, going into the fall, this time, everyone's healthy. And if you have all those pieces together, you might even have depth.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Does Rice have the depth to kind of overcome the injuries that are going to come with playing football, right? I think that was one of the things I asked Bloomgren when I was there for magazine stuff was how do you feel about the depth? And he seemed to be pretty honest about it in terms of we haven't had it before. We think we have it now. Did that bear out to kind of you when you were watching spring where maybe that next group of guys was better than the next group of guys was maybe in 2019, 2020?
I think so, because in years past, the defense has been so good that because every part of scrimmage, you do the ones versus ones, and then you do the ones versus twos. And for whenever it had been the second team offense versus the first team defense in years past, stick at a fork and a good night. It's over. We saw the second team offense. You mentioned some of those wide receivers. You put Luke McCaffrey in there and just hand him the football. It didn't matter what other 10 guys are on the field. So we saw some sparks there. And then they had guys like JoJo Jean, who, was probably the 5th, 6th, 7th corner on the depth chart going into spring. They only have 3 corners active for a scrimmage, and he steps up and is going one-on-one with the best receivers Rice has. So I think that's an encouraging sign, because the bones, especially on defense, are good. To be able to see the 2s and the 3s come in and hold their own, against playmakers like McCaffrey and Trey Patterson, that's encouraging. So I think that the second level is better than it's been in some time. It would be nice not to need them immediately. That's what Rice is hoping for.
What is your, I'm going to put you on the spot here, kind of what is your realistic expectations, record prediction for 2022 if you had to pick right now?
Uh, I think 6-6 is, that's obviously you want to make it to a bowl game. You'd love to go win out. I think the upside is UAB last year. We saw Rice win on offense, win on defense, and win on special teams. I think from a roster construction perspective, this team is just as good, if not better, just from sheer pieces than they were last year. But you kind of got to look at the schedule. Especially starting at USC, you got Louisiana, who even without Billy Napier has been a juggernaut in years past, and Houston. And that's a really tough start out of the gate. And then you get non-conference play and you're starting out, against UAB. So it's going to be a tough opening haul. Last year before, Rice has had a Southern Miss to kind of stick in the middle to say, y'all are a couple years behind us on the rebuilding process, get a win, kind of get our feet wet. There's not really any gimmies on this schedule. Got an FCS game. But I think, and if you get to 6-6 with this schedule, I think that's kind of, proof in the pudding that, okay, we got the pieces here and we can take the next step. I think certainly with this staff and kind of how luck they've had, I'm not going to be shocked if they go, split down and get 3 wins. And I'm not going to be shocked if they punch up and they get 9. They're not be a 1-win team. We have seen the consistency, I think, for them to be an 11-win team, but they're going to be somewhere in the middle, which with Conference USA, other than, maybe UAB, UTSA up at the top, I think we're going to see a lot of teams in that 5 to 8 win range, just like last year.
Yeah, I mean, we saw how UTEP made such a big jump, right? I mean, go from 0 wins to 1 win, and then up to 7 wins in 2021. So, yeah, I agree with you. The middle of the pack in Conference USA can go either way. And then obviously I'm going to end with this, like the moving to the American is kind of on the fingertips of everybody, because of the announcement that it's going to be 2023. Let's say I make you Rice czar, right? Like Rice athletic director for the week, and you got to get some stuff done or change some stuff to kind of get ready to move to the American as a football program. What are 1 or 2 things that you would be doing right away to kind of gear up for that change?
The first thing I do is I look at Rice Stadium, and that's something I'll give credit to the current administration. They're doing that right now. They put in, it used to be an old concrete slab running it across the bottom and just kind of looked like a parking garage. They've got a brick exterior going up right now. It looks really nice. I think getting the fan experience up is going to be really important, because if you want people to go to football games, especially sit outside in August and September in Houston, where it's a million degrees, you got to make it a worthwhile experience. That's winning. But there are things you can do when you're not winning to make games fun, make people want to attend. You see, I think the Sun Belt teams get a lot of credit for it, not big budgets, but big fan bases and small fan bases that really, really care. So I think if there's a jump, something that I would do, get your thing taken, pull everybody together. What can you do to the stadium that, was built 80 years ago? How can you modernize it? What can you do to make the game day experience better? If you can do that, and you tie that in with a bowl game, with a 6, 7, 8 win season this year, then you can kind of paint the story of, hey, we're moving to this new conference and we're better. You do those things together, and everything's everything's good, right?
All right, man. I really appreciate the time. That's Matthew Bartlett at theroost.com. Enjoy your work as always, and we'll catch up, I'm sure, before the football season starts.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mike. Take care.